you refinance out your cash and then do it again. To get it vertically integrated and do it all in one shop, like I believe there's some real value there. And welcome back to episode 8 of the Main Street Patriot podcast. I am your host, Jimmy Vreeland, and with me is always my producer, Jake. Jake, how are you doing today?
Good, man. How you doing? It's great to be here with you.
So we recorded inflation yesterday, and episode
that was awesome.
7.
Mind-blowing.
I still feel like you've been mind-blown.
Yes, definitely.
I guess I'm going to be kind of bragging about myself, but here's why that episode was fun for me, is I got to include real estate, economics, my time in the military. I got to grab a bunch of ideas from a bunch of places and kind of put them together. At the end of the day, that's what I really enjoy doing, and why I enjoy the real estate, because it always ties into economics. It always ties into
history. I mean, military history is fascinating. It's
weird, right?
Stuff. Yeah, and
then it also ties into personal stuff about personal goals, target setting, I don't know if everybody hates this word, but there's not a better, self-improvement.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I think I'm just going to call it getting better.
Yeah.
Much more simple.
Human growth.
So throughout the podcast so far, we've laid kind of the groundwork of why is real estate interesting. And now this episode, I want to get into some more of the specifics, and particularly the specific deal types.
Okay. Well, and why is this important for the listeners to know, Jimmy?
After they get fired up about real estate, then the next thing is like, okay, well, how do I do it? What kind of deal do I want?
Got it.
And so that's kind of the natural progression of thought. And so if you come work with Vreeland Capital and Ranger Real Estate, there's 4 distinct deal types we deal with I try to break it down very simply into 4 deal types so it makes sense and it's very investable and very usable. So
by the end of today's episode, people are going to kind of have everything they need to know to work with you guys on those 4 deal types that you guys do for them.
Yeah, they're going to want to know which investor, should add this to their buying criteria, what kind of deal this type of person wants.
Cool.
And so I'll also go through like, hey, here's the type of person these deals serve best.
But first,
before we get to that, let's talk about the free Facebook group, Ranger Real Estate, How to Get Wealthy on Main Street, where I'll be dropping some of the different deal types. And we'll be dropping the videos that explain the different deal types. And, there's Q&A, there's other investors in the community. We're trying to create kind of an ecosystem of the passive investor.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and you guys do drop the deals in there. So that's really cool. Better snatch them up.
And we will drop podcast episodes in there too.
That's right.
All right, so let's get into the deal type. So let's say you've listened to 7 episodes. You're convinced I want to add real estate to my portfolio. Then, and you have a cash machine, and you want to be a passive investor. So then the next question is, do I want flips? Do I want rentals? Do I want cash deals? Do I want deals that are financed? And so we'll kind of start there. And so if you're any way past your first 10 YouTube videos on wanting to invest in real estate, about a BRRRR deal, right? And so a BRRRR is a buy.
I hope so. I'm sure they do.
Yeah, I would hope. And so a BRRRR deal is a buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. And the point of this is they call it an infinite return on real estate. It's more of a forced equity strategy.
Okay.
But what you're trying to do is leave as much as your cash into the deal as possible and maximize the leverage on the deal.
Yeah.
So that you can, if you have $100,000 and you only have to put $10,000 into each house, then you can buy 10 houses. Where if you have to put $20,000 into each house, you can only buy 5 houses.
Right.
So you're trying to expand your portfolio rapidly with the little amount, as little amount of your cash as possible.
Yep.
And then once again, doing that, I'll show this in the numbers. Having that little amount of cash in a deal and the same amount of appreciation, that 5% bump a year, your returns go up astronomically.
Right.
Where an average turnkey house where you put 20% down, The average return per year is 30%. A Berkey is hitting sometimes up to 60%.
Okay.
Rate of return. Same amount of return, but the rate is nuts because you have so little cash into it.
You use that expression, infinite return. Like, can you define that? And what do people mean by that?
So I would define that by, hey, I have none of my own cash into the deal. And so if none of my own cash is in the deal and you're making money, your return's infinite.
Sure. Okay.
If you're dividing your return by
Right.
the cash you have in the deal, and
Yep.
if the number's zero, technically
Infinity.
it's infinite.
For those of you that remember 7th grade math.
7th grade, yeah. Is that,
I don't know what it was.
Is that arithmetic or algebra?
I feel like we didn't get into that until at least algebra.
Okay. So what's also going to be hard about this, like when I do this on a video, it's very easy to write out the numbers and show the numbers. So the
Yep.
challenge of this podcast, and I'll do my best, listeners, is to do the math. And so I'm going to do as simple a math as I can possibly envision.
Nice.
And so let's kind of explain forced equity. Forced equity is, so let me back up even one more step. Real estate revolves completely around, I call it the 80% rule. And so a bank will loan you 80% of the cash. Thus, everybody wants to be into the deal for 20% of their own cash. Mm-hmm. So here's how you force equity. Let's take a $100,000 house, and let's say you have a purchase price of 80. You have a purchase price of 60 and a rehab price of 20. So you're all into the deal for 80%, and you bought it at 60, but you were economical with your rehab, and your rehab, even though you only spent 20, actually added $40,000 of value.
Right.
And so, because people are like, how does this happen? Well, it's like, well, your $20,000 rehab added $40,000 of value.
Right.
So you're all in for 80. The bank will loan you 80% of the value of the house. Mm-hmm. So you go to an appraiser, Mr. Appraiser, hey, this house is worth $100,000. The appraiser agrees. How much is the bank going to lend you?
20%.
No, they're going to lend you 80%.
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry.
They're going to lend you 80 grand, right?
Yep.
You got 80 grand in the deal. The bank's going to lend you 80 grand. You pull all your cash out. Your starter capital has all been retrieved. Your balance sheet says you have a $100,000 asset and you have an $80,000 liability. So your net worth just went up by 20 grand magically. Not magically. You economically.
You forced it.
Yeah, you forced the equity.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Total.
So the reason this is appealing to investors is like, cool, I started the day with $20,000. I now have a house. I refinanced out I started the day or the project with $80,000. The project's done. I have a house now, and I have my $80,000 back. And so what do you think most investors do with that $80,000 they got back?
Hopefully reinvested.
Do it again.
Yeah.
And so this is how I actually I started, it took me 10 years to get to 20 houses. I got to 60 houses in 1 year because I just did several BRRRRs over and over and over again.
Yep.
So if you're going to move fast, you got to know the BRRRR strategy.
Sure.
So then what I've seen happen is people know they want to get into real estate. They understand the BRRRR deal. And then if you look at Bigger Pockets, everybody in Bigger Pockets is looking for this elusive BRRRR deal.
Yeah.
They're highly productive individuals, and they take their eye off the ball to go look for this elusive BRRRR deal.
Yeah. Right. They already have the cash machine.
Yes.
High performing individual.
Yes.
They take the eye off the ball to go and try to find
To take a low-paying job in real estate.
elusive BRRRR deal.
Yeah. So we're going to get into turnkeys, but we had done like 500 turnkeys before we thought of Berkeys. It's like we're wholesaling houses, and it's like, look, everybody wants to be, after rehab, into a deal for 80%. So I'm like, I wholesale deals. Why don't I just wholesale deals where people get into the deal at 80%?
Yeah.
And so then we invented the Berkey. And then, so a California buyer has no chance to do a Berkey,
Right.
BRRRR. But if they work with my team, they have a chance to do a Berkey.
Right.
And
right.
the buyers love this.
Huh.
And so that's how we invented the Berkey. So that's deal type 1. That's probably the most of the deals we do.
Okay.
Is the Berkey. And so we'll find you the house. We'll connect you with the contractor. We'll get you all in between 80 and 85% of the deal. You refinance out your cash and then do it again. So a lot of people.
Yeah, no wonder they love that.
Yeah,
they can't do it by themselves, like you said.
No.
It's virtually impossible.
pretty much.
Yeah.
To get it vertically integrated
Yep.
and do it all in one shop.
Yep.
Like I believe there's some real value there.
For sure.
And so a lot of investors will come to us with $250,000 to invest, and then they'll have 3 assets, and they still have around $220,000. So it's like it extends they have a cash machine, they have a big pile of cash, and these deals extend their pile of cash.
Yep. Yep.
So the downside of a BRRRR is you got to wait for the rehab, right? Average rehab's 90 days, and then you wait you can refi earlier, but then a lot of times it takes another couple months to get the refi done.
Yep.
So then I was seeing a bunch of occupied deals that we call tired landlord deals. And so we saw this a lot in COVID when there was a bunch of tenants not paying, and landlords who managed themselves or were older just got tired and said, oh, screw it. I just want to sell this house. And we were happy to be there and buy there.
Sure.
And so I took the BRRRR forced equity strategy, and I'm like, well, you know what would be awesome about a BRRRR if people didn't have to wait for the rehab? What would have to happen so people don't have to wait for the rehab? Well, the house would already have to be rehab and occupied.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm like, wait a minute. I see deals like that all the time. I call those tired landlord deals.
Right. Right. Right.
And so same strategy. We're trying to force equity. We're trying to buy an asset at 80% of its value.
Yep.
And so what you'll see is a bunch of tired landlords. They're investors. They know they're not going to get retail, and they're tired. And then the other thing is generally the house is under-rented. Most people who aren't professional property managers, they make 2 mistakes. They get bad residents and under-rent the tenant. And so generally these houses are under-rented. And since rental real estate sells at a function of its rent rate.
Yep.
Like right now we sell houses at 115 times the monthly rent.
Okay.
So we'll go to Mr. Tired Landlord, even though the house should be renting at $1,000 a month and it should be worth $115,000, it's at $800. And so we're like, look, Mr. Tired Landlord, what's 800 times 115? What, real quick. So that's 92,000. So we go, hey, Mr. Tired Landlord, this house is only worth 10 times its rent. It's worth 92,000. And so they'll be understanding, and they're tired. And I call it the Braveheart sale. You've seen Braveheart, right?
Yeah.
Remember at the end when they're like torturing him and like pulling his guts out, and the torturer's like, kiss the rose, and this all goes away. We're kind of do the same approach. It's like, sign this contract, and all this pain of self-managing, which is a horrible idea, it all goes away.
Yeah.
So they're only too happy for us to take this house
Sure. Yeah.
off their plate.
It's worth it to them.
Yeah. So then what we're able to do, and a lot of these deals are Section 8. And so for people with cash machines, we should probably do an episode on Section 8 eventually.
Yeah. Okay.
But bottom line is this. Right now on the internet, we got a bunch of gurus saying, hey, I can get these Section 8 houses that'll rent out for $1,000 and you're only going to be $40,000 into them. And like, I can go in St. Louis right now and buy a house for $5,000.
Right.
But you're not going to get a quality resident. And then it's kind of outside the scope of this podcast, but most Section 8 tenants, they know the value of their voucher, and they're not going to pay for that. They're not going to use their voucher for a house like that.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
a lot of people, our clients, want Section 8 deals. I like Section 8 deals that already have an occupied tenant.
Yep.
So generally, we can buy these Section 8 deals at 80% of its appraised value. Once again, we force the equity. Then we sell it to our investor at around 80% of its value. Investor can, since there's no rehab, investor can go to the bank day one and refi out their cash.
Right.
So
Wow.
yeah, so you get a tired landlord deal for 80 grand. House is worth 100. You buy it on January 1st, January 2nd, you start the refi, depending on the bank. Probably by February 1st, you have all your cash back and an asset.
But are you able to, you said you force the appreciation just by like upping that Section 8 credit? In
That generally,
case?
that takes a couple months to get done.
Yeah.
But eventually, yeah, then your rent will raise too. Generally,
Right.
day one,
But you could, I guess you just show the comps to the bank and say, hey, this house is really worth this.
yeah.
Yeah.
We can generally buy it at such a discount that we get the RN buyer in at 80%,
That's awesome.
80 to 85.
Man.
So once again, they extend their pile of cash.
Yep. Yep.
So then the deal types we started with were actually turnkey deals.
Yeah. So what do you mean by that?
So turnkey is the house is already rent ready, the rehab's done, and you can do a 30-year fixed loan where you put 20 or 25% down, and you do a turnkey deal. So you don't have to wait for the rehab. It's already rehab.
Yeah.
Everything's ready to go.
You've got a tenant in there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so turnkey deals are best for new investors who are starting and learning, because sometimes the rehab process can be a little stressful, and there's delays and everything. So turnkeys are best for people, who they want it super, super passive. They don't even have time to help, monitor the rehab.
Yep.
Or they don't have the cash to just buy the house cash.
Right.
And so they're going to put a 20 to 25% down payment and then get a 30-year fixed loan and buy the house. Mm-hmm. So turnkeys are great at like a barbell approach. If you're just super liquid and you need to deploy cash, go turnkey. If you're not as liquid and you don't have enough money to buy the house cash, then you save up for your turnkey down payment and buy it, and then put your down payment down. And turkeys are basically the simplest fire and forget assets.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like for somebody that's just getting to this for the first time, this is one way to, I guess, reduce the parts of the process that you have to learn to do the first deal. And obviously, you and your team are walking them through the whole thing, but this just kind of even reduces that even further. Like, hey, do the numbers make sense on this deal?
Yeah.
Awesome. Like, it's ready to go.
So even somebody new to real estate, I basically say, hey, let's do 2 turnkeys. Once you like the turnkeys, let's go start getting into some BRRRRs.
Okay. Nice.
And so that's how that deal kind of works. And so
You started with that. That was kind of the main thing that you guys were doing. You were doing the rehabs, getting tenants placed, getting them ready to go for investors.
yeah, and so then the problem became with turnkeys, even like some of our wealthier clients, they all ran out of down payment cash. So then that's where the BRRRR came in place. Like, hey, let's extend your capital.
Yep.
And see how many of these assets you can acquire. So if they were doing turnkey, it would probably take them, probably a full 10 years, even some of the wealthier people, because you're going to need, let's say a $200,000 house. Let's say you put a 25% down payment. That's, and you did 2 a year. That's $100,000 a year in down payments.
Yeah.
So then it would take $1 million to get to your 20-unit portfolio. So with a BRRRR, it's going to be, around probably I've ran numbers on this. It's probably around 600 to get to that 20-unit portfolio.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Like you said, extends their investment capital.
Yep. And then there's some people who they want cash flow now. So it's, I think I'm one of the people on the internet that's honest about them. If you want cash flow now, you got to flip.
Yeah.
And so
Right. And it's not passive.
Well, it is with us.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a flip key.
Oh, okay.
Because once you start getting into the $250,000 range,
Yep.
houses won't be cash flow positive.
Right.
And so we don't encourage people to be coming out of their pocket to pay the mortgage every month.
Yeah.
And so we are getting these great deals from wholesaling, and we were flipping them ourselves. And I was just like, and then one of our investors said, hey, why can't I just buy it from you wholesale and use your team and flip it? And I was just like, well, I don't know why you can't. You want to do that? And then that's how flip keys were invented.
Okay.
And
Nice.
so the difference between a flip and a BRRRR is you just sell the house.
Right.
And so a lot of people are like, well, I want cash now. I don't want the forced equity going on my balance sheet. I want the cash now. Because then they'll build up their cash so they can buy a rental.
Sure.
So it's people with cash machines, but they just want a little more cash. Maybe they want to make 20 to 30 grand and take a vacation. And so for those people, we'll do flip keys.
Got it. Nice. So those are the 4 deal types that you guys do for all the investors.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is it probably easier to predict maintenance costs for a turnkey versus some of the other ones? Or like, how does that work for a new investor who's walking into one of those deals and trying to, analyze how they're going to be going month to month?
Yeah, I don't know, because here's the deal with a turnkey. We're gonna like rip out good mechanicals, which is one thing I've never liked about turnkey, because the hope is that you would lower maintenance costs. But a lot of BRRRRs aren't going to pencil if we're tearing out a usable air conditioner or a usable water heater just to say it's new and turnkey. That's one of my problems with the turnkey. Is it's like we're getting rid of some really good assets. So with a BRRRR, as long as the mechanical's functional, we're gonna keep letting it ride. I need to probably find some data from property management, but I have not seen, because like for me personally, I've never done a rehab on one of my own rentals that would be full turnkey.
Okay.
If the AC's working, if the heater's working, if the water heater's working,
get some more life out of it.
Yeah. Like why not? But then a new investor gets so panicky over a maintenance expense, where I just know it's a cost of doing business.
Right.
And then technically, let's say I buy a house today, and then I got to replace. Let's say I got to replace an HVAC unit, $4,500 3 years from now.
Yep.
I've already made 20 grand on appreciation on that house, so I'd rather do it 3 years from now.
Sure.
And get the write off.
Yep.
So that's the other reason I would, I encourage people who are very liquid to do the BRRRRs.
Yeah.
And because they can move faster too.
Sure. Yeah. Is there a possibility, because a flip key is going to take a few months to do, right?
Not as long as a BRRRR.
Sure. Okay. And is there a possibility of, it's not going to appraise at the value that is expected?
Yeah, that's one of the risks that,
always a
that you
risk.
go through.
Yep.
And so I'm actually on our monthly call today, I'm actually going through how we do our appraisal process. But we run our own internal comps. I'm an agent, so I run an agent comp. But then the agent who's going to be selling the flip also runs their comp and says, hey, here's what the scope needs to look like, because they don't want to waste their time listing the house if it's not going to sell fast.
Right. Yeah. Nice. So it seems like every strategy, even for somebody that has a cash machine, high performing, has its benefits and different aspects to it that make it part of their strategy. So is this part of your, when you said you define their buying criteria?
Yeah.
In like that target setting call?
Yeah.
This is where you're going to start to establish like basically what their customized plan is?
So like I was on one last week, and it was a dude making like $750,000 a year actively. And he's like, Jimmy, I want to flip a bunch. And he lives in California. His effective tax rate is like 50%. I was like, why? He's like, I want more cash. And I'm like, why? I'm like, you got on this call telling me you want to build your wealth and, get some tax advantage because you have a huge tax target on your back. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're right. And I'm like, so that's where there's got to be that personalized plan, because if you have an effective tax rate of 45 to 50%,
right,
and you flip a house, when I flip a house, I pay ordinary income taxes on it.
Right.
And so I was just like, let's say you make 30 grand on a flip, and then you have to give 15 of it to the government. Why not keep it as a BRRRR and then do a cost seg study on it and actually save on taxes, and then that 30 grand that you were going to pocket, just keep it on your balance sheet.
Yeah.
And so that's why there has to be a personalized plan.
Right.
Can't necessarily say, hey, this is a one size fits all.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So hence the importance of that target setting call. Once they join the program, say, hey, we're trying to get that 20 unit portfolio, but here's how we're going to do this.
Yeah.
These many deals a year, these types of deals, these particular criteria.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense. Some of this relies on a lot of teamwork between the different companies and what have you. So how do you guys accomplish that? And maybe that's a subject for another podcast. But,
it might be.
Yeah.
I think it would be fun if we had some of the team members in.
Oh, yeah, great.
Kind of talk about that. But the short question is we have very meticulous process software.
Yes.
To get it to go from stage to stage to stage.
Sure.
And, we've done it 1,000 times, so we're getting better at it. I'd say we're good at it. I don't know if we're great. Always trying to get better at it. But, yeah, there is a handoff between acquisitions, rehab, and then leasing or selling.
Yeah. I've seen some of you guys' software. It is meticulous. Like, I was on a call with you guys the other day.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't even read of it because there was so much detail going into it on the computer screen that I was looking at it at.
I mean, and that's the subject of another podcast of like becoming a process-oriented person. Like that's the closest I've ever come to quitting. When I realized the process load it was going to take to go from a hustler to a business.
Uh-huh.
And I was at the Collective Genius when I saw what it was going to take.
Yeah.
And I'm like in the hotel room that night, and my wife went on that trip, and I was just like, I don't think I want to do this. And then I slept on it. She was like, stop being a baby. And then we got to work. But that's also as close as I've ever come to getting divorced. Because my wife was in the business at that time. And so I would just, all we did for like 2 months is I'd follow her around and be like, and then what do you do? And then what do you do? And that's how we built out our processes. It was miserable.
That sounds like definitely a story for another podcast. I would love to hear that journey. And because you guys have a strong relationship now. I guess you always probably did, but.
Me and the team or me and my wife?
You and your wife.
I mean, my wife has an infinite amount of patience. But like she was, once she came into the business because we needed her.
Uh-huh.
You know, she was another highly successful corporate salesperson and a lot more organized than me. And like, you know, she's just like, what a dumbass. So she came in, cleaned everything up, like fired half of the old team. Uh-huh. And then once the business got up and running, and then we were able to hire her out, like she was more than happy to say goodbye.
Yeah.
Which I don't get it. Like I love this stuff.
Well, thank goodness you guys persevered because I mean, you offer incredible service to investors.
Well, that's the fun of the game.
Yeah.
So is like seeing people build a 20-unit portfolio.
Yeah.
And you know, our team I know gets fired up about it, and then our team is trying to build their own 20-unit portfolios themselves. Mm-hmm. And so we got to help them build their own cash machines, though.
Sure. Nice. And you mentioned like the discipline that it takes even to build the company. Likewise, it takes a lot of discipline on behalf of the investors, kind of stick to the plan, get their eye on the ball. But if they do so, like they follow the plan, they can build that portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, it inevitably just happens. But like we've talked about, the first year is absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
And so
get ready. That's the 9-year-old baseball.
It's the 9-year-old baseball. It's like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
All it is problems. And then generally, I for my own units, it's like year 3. It's like, oh man, this thing is awesome. This is the best decision. I've never seen anybody on their deathbed being like, wow, I wish I would have owned less real estate.
I've never heard that before, but I'm sure it's true.
That should be we should definitely make a short of that.
Yeah, exactly. And some T-shirts.
Yeah. I don't know if that's strong enough for a T-shirt.
Maybe not.
I do think a Main Street Patriot logo podcast would be a strong T-shirt.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, anything else you think I need to explain to folks?
No, those are the 4 deal types. What are we going to talk about next time?
What are we going to talk about next time? And then the other thing about most people's portfolio, it's a mixing and matching of the different deal types.
Yeah, sure.
To get to that 20%. And then sometimes people are just like, hey, I want another 30 grand. I'm just going to flip a house. Can we do that, Jimmy? I was like, cool. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I think you want to get into do the deep dive into the 4 pillars. You mentioned leverage, so I know we're going to do a deep dive on that. I'm excited for that one. I think next is appreciation.
Let's do everybody's favorite, appreciation.
What did you say about that? Never bet against the champ?
Never, ever bet against the champ.
Here we go. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, we're also going to talk about why real estate is like the Rodney Dangerfield of all investing.
Ooh.
And how it always gets bagged on.
Okay. Fantastic. So, any final takeaway you want them to have?
Just, if you want to build that 20-unit portfolio, you got to extend your capital out as far as possible, and that's where that's where you have to force as much equity as you possibly can.
Nice.
So, if you guys found interest in this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're interested in finding yourself a BRRRR or a tired landlord deal or a flip key or a turnkey, click the link in the show notes and let's book a call with one of my team members and see if we can help you build that portfolio.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed, like, share, subscribe, Get it to one of your friends who might have a cash machine and needs to get that portfolio and doesn't have the time to do it.
Awesome. All right. See you guys.
Bye.
So if you like what you heard today and you want to learn more, sign up for a discovery call with one of the Vreeland Capital success coaches at jimmyvreeland.com.